your anxiety, to take control of your anger, which may be rampant, out of bounds, beyond your control, at least you think it is. Well, with the consistent application of these techniques, you will be able to bring your life more in line with that internal image you have of yourself as a mature and intelligent individual. And all right, let's get right into today's lessons. We've been looking at objectivity as a means of ending panic attacks. And we read last week several comments by people who were experiencing anxiety and panic symptoms, palpitations, shortness of breath, migraine headaches, etc., etc., etc. Now, this week, we're going to look at Dr. Lowe's comments on this panel discussion. And we're reading from Dr. Abraham A. Lowe's wonderful work, Mental Health Through Will Training. And the chapter is Objectivity as a Means of Terminating Panic Attacks. Now, Dr. Lowe says here, after hearing last week's discussion, I shall limit myself to discussing the remark about objectivity made by Annette in the latter part of her example, when she said she remembered that the physician had told her the best way to calm down is to do something absolutely unemotional, something that has definitely nothing to do with excitement and temper read anger, something that is utterly objective. She then proceeded to look at the sensation she was experiencing as she might look at an object out in front of her. I asked, she said, where is that sensation? And when we began to analyze asking questions such as where is that sensation, how intense is it, this forces us to use the logical portion of our brain. We become objective, and being objective is mutually exclusive of emotionality or fiery imagination or fear. We are coldly objective, and we can analyze, now go by the realistic facts of the situation instead of our wild imaginings. But continuing on, she says, where is that sensation? Where do I feel it most? Is it in my arms, my stomach, my chest, or my legs? Just exactly what kind of a sensation is it? Can I describe it? But when she thus transported herself into a mood of objectivity, the sensation was gone the very moment I started to look at it, she said, and I fell asleep. With the simplicity characteristic of Annette, she added that when she awoke in the morning, she felt proud of her achievement. Annette had indeed reasons for feeling proud. What she had accomplished was to demonstrate the fundamental principle of our technique, that symptoms can be conquered, stopped, diminished, by means of a simple and innocent procedure that can be initiated by anyone, patients, etc. This is self-help. The particular principle of self-help mentioned by Annette was formulated several years ago when one day our friend Frank Rockford recounted or told about a simple and innocent experience he had while he was thinking about and observing his fatigue symptoms. Frank's account was approximately as follows. He said, "You tell us we have to be patient, that we have to wait patiently until the symptom disappears. Well, the other day I felt fatigued again, just exhausted. My legs felt heavy. My arms felt heavy. It felt as though I had to take every effort in order to be able to move them. So I knew I had to wait, so I pulled out my watch to see how long I would have to wait. While I was looking at the watch, counting the minutes and seconds, I suddenly noticed that I no longer felt this fatigue. Next time I tried that trick with the watch again, but I couldn't count the time because before I could look at the hands of the dial, the tired feeling was gone again. Frank conquered an almost intractable sensation, long and enduring, through objectivity. And Annette stopped a blazing panic with the same simple procedure. And I told you repeatedly that the wildest anger outbursts can be checked instantly if you take the objective view that you are not the judge as to who is right and who is wrong. I would extend indefinitely the list of occasions in which disturbances, emotional upsets, can be disposed of without much of a problem or much ado by adopting an objective view. You have pressure in the head and you shudder at the thought of a tumor. Then you substitute my objective diagnosis for your wild imaginings, and the pressure is relieved. What then is objectivity, and what is the reason for its magical effect on nervous and stress-related symptoms? Well, I shall ask you to view this conference table where I am now delivering my address. I shall describe it as being about 1 yard and 2 inches in height, having a brown color, 4 legs, 2 drawers, and adding a few other items of a similar nature. Now this type of description deals with height, color, number of legs and drawers. And I could mention other few descriptive details, such as the position of the table relative to the walls and the windows, the number of chairs it will accommodate, and the hardness or softness of its wood. If this is all I say, then every one of you could easily verify my statements simply by using a tape measure or by touching and looking at the table, i.e. by use of your senses. You will now agree that one characteristic of objectivity is the possibility of verifying a statement either by measurement or by sense perception. Suppose now that while speaking of this conference table, I display feeling. I dwell tenderly on the moments of great inspiration which I experience when I behold this eager audience of patients rapturously listening to my remarks. I may go on in the same emotional vein, extolling the singular value of recovery activities on which this table is a symbol, or the great deeds of human salvation which have been performed right here from this table. If I continue in this exalted style, you will soon realize that what I say has nothing to do with measurement and sense perception. It is an account, flowery, exaggerated, of my personal and subjective feelings, not a description plain and unadorned of the unemotional and objective qualities of the table. My first report of color, height, distance, hardness, softness was objective because, using measurements and sense perception, I steered clear of emotion. My second report was subjective because, eliminating measurement and sense perception, I emphasized feeling. Objectivity then means 1, employment of measurement and sense perception, and 2, the elimination of feeling and emotion. Now, I have answered my first question, what is objectivity? Now I shall try to give the answer to my second question, what is the reason for its magical effect on nervous and stress-related symptoms? And unfortunately, we've run out of time for our reading, and we'll have to take that up next week. And I'm sure you'll be waiting anxiously to find the answer. So, since our title is Objectivity as a means of terminating panic attacks, well, just how does this work? Well, we have an example from the internet, the recovery website, that also demonstrates and teaches these techniques. You can go there and you can post examples, you can read examples by people who have been using the technique for years and see how they, in fact, use the techniques to diminish their fears, their anxieties, and control their panics or their anger. And our example today is titled Panic Attack, and is by Lori. And she says, on Friday I was dictating emotion and I was reading some quotes from a case when I started stumbling over the words and the punctuation. I was looking at a comma and wanting to call it a quote, etc. I must have been feeling a little mentally fatigued. That is when I began to work myself up. Obviously, she's a lawyer and she has an important case. But she goes on, my symptoms were panic, shortness of breath, extreme fearfulness, palpitations. My racing thoughts were, oh my God, I can't read. I must be having a stroke. I'm losing control mentally. This could be it, etc., 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 she says. My stomach was shaky. I felt nauseous. I felt faint, and I was afraid I was going to collapse at any moment. Now, she's experiencing these distressing symptoms. And being a member of recovery, she has obviously been diagnosed by a doctor as having a nervous condition or stress-related symptoms. And she has been using the techniques long enough to know how to apply them, and she has faith in their effectiveness. At this point, noticing her symptoms, she begins to analyze the situation, which we call spotting, like shining a spotlight on things so that they become clear, so that you can see them. That's one way of looking at it. It's basically analysis. So now she begins to analyze her racing thoughts, her symptoms of nausea, the fearfulness, the trembling, the shortness of breath, the extreme fearfulness, the palpitations. And by analyzing them, asking questions, she will become objective. Let's see. She says here, I spotted that I should function and fumble and continue moving my muscles. I volunteered to pick up lunch for the secretaries. I took a walk while waiting for the lunch to be ready. She's taking no motions or actions that indicate that there is a real and present danger, something in fact to be panicky about. She's calming herself down. I volunteered to pick up lunch for the secretaries. I took a walk while waiting for the lunch to be ready. I spotted that it is average to misspeak and to fumble up your words. And she says here in parentheses, this is really an example for help. I spotted that my fiery imagination was acting up on me, and that feelings are not facts. Even though she feels something is in fact true and happening, that is not a fact until you validate it in the external reality to see if it is really a fact. Feelings are not facts. They lie and deceive and tell you there's danger when there is not. She says here, before, and she puts in parentheses, getting back to recovery, obviously she learned how to use the techniques, and then, confident in her ability to use them, she stopped going to meetings. Now she's come back to the meetings because she found out she needed reinforcement. Before getting back to recovery, I might have gone home. I might have called my husband or a friend in a panic. I might not have gone back to the office and would probably have canceled my afternoon appointment. I endorse myself for having the will to bear the discomfort and to continue functioning in spite of my symptoms. Lori S. That's a very good recovery from the initial onset of what appeared to be very distressing and extremely upsetting symptoms. A panic attack, in fact. and she was able to stop the panic attack, apply the axioms, and diminish the distressing symptoms until they were no longer interfering with her daily routine. Now, Rosie checks in on this example, and of course we're assuming, and we want to say that you just can't interpret or diagnose yourself. You need to see a physician and receive a physician's diagnosis. Make sure there isn't any physical problems. If you've been under stress for a long time, you've been experiencing symptoms of this nature. And after you've been checked out by a doctor and reassured that there's nothing physically wrong, that your case may be a case of nerves or inability, you're suffering from stress, an inability to diminish the stress because you don't have a coping strategy, then these techniques and axioms are applicable to you. They are something that you can use quite easily. It's free, doesn't cost anything. All it is cost is practice, 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 like in the reading today. This is a skill. There are people in various walks of life. Some are suffering stress and some are not. Why? It's because of what they do with their internal dialogue. So this is a skill that can be learned. You can learn to do the same thing with your internal dialogue and receive the even more excellent results in diminishing your symptoms. Now she goes on to say, feelings rise and fall as long as we don't attach danger to them. Lori pushed the will to effort. She moved her muscles and continued functioning in spite of the symptoms. Now the axioms that accompany that are, it's not how I feel, it's how I function, which is to remind us that we can function in spite of the way we're feeling. Also, we do not have to feel good in order to function competently. And you can look through your experience and remember various times when you may have been a little under the weather, or you may have been a little stressed out. You may have, in fact, been coming down with the flu, but you had to perform, perhaps at your work, perhaps at a meeting, perhaps you had to give a talk, perhaps you had to perform a physical skill that required your concentration. But you became focused on the task at hand, and you got through it. And when you were through, people said, wow, hey, you did a great job. But all the time you were thinking that you were doing quite poorly, and everyone knew it and could see, and that everyone was saying that you were, weren't up to par, or what's wrong with her, or what's wrong with him. But in fact, we are not transparent, and people cannot see through us unless our emotions are extremely distressing. And so, this can be a secure thought. We can function in spite of the way we're feeling, and we don't have to feel absolutely perfect in order to function. Lori pushed the will to effort, moving her muscles and continued functioning in spite of the symptoms. She took a cooling off period, going out for a walk, being group-minded with other co-workers. She didn't create a scene and draw attention all to herself, and using the self-help tools. Big improvement before having learned the method and after. Now, recovery of self-talk is not easy, but it works. Now, people often say this, but in a manner of speaking, it just takes practice. The difference is when we're doing something that we are looking forward to enthusiastically, we don't worry about the discomfort. Learning to drive, people very rarely are upset about the difficulty or bearing the discomfort because they are so enthusiastic and looking forward to learning that particular skill. So skills that we're looking forward to learn, we don't even give a thought to the difficulty of the discomfort. But when it comes to things like changing our thoughts, we think that that is extremely hard and extremely difficult. But think about it, we exchange thoughts all day long. Our thoughts range from the past to the future, what we might have experienced last year on a vacation, to an upcoming event on the weekend. Music that we may be listening to on the radio, what to plan for dinner tonight, or whether we're going to eat out. So it's a various range called the stream of thought. The only time this gets interrupted is when we become preoccupied or obsessed by an idea that we're attaching danger to. And then that thought preoccupies our brain to the exclusion of others. And this is when we have the onset of distressing symptoms of all kinds. So when we become objective and reestablish the stream of thought, then our symptoms begin to diminish. But going on, the method is not easy, but it works. The more we use it, the better we get. Endorse for all the effort and for making a business of your mental health. Now, it says here it's not easy, but it works. But as we work the axioms and we begin to see results, we become enthusiastic, just like in our other learning experiences where we are initially enthusiastic before we begin. Here we become enthusiastic when we see the results, which sometimes can be quite startling with the application of just simple axioms such as, this is distressing but not dangerous. The remembrance of a simple axiom like this can remind us that we may have felt these palpitations hundreds of times before, and they didn't kill us. We've been reassured that it's a stress condition, so it's not really dangerous. Taking the danger and the fear out, then these symptoms start to diminish. Okay, Bob Day checks in and he says, I spot the will to effort, the will to bear discomfort, and the will to friendship, the will to remedy, the will to get well, to apply the axioms. He spots also the will to income, to stay on the job, in spite of the way she was feeling, bearing the discomfort. This is the will to bear the discomfort. The will to her own mental health. Plenty to endorse for over former days if she chooses. And we should choose to give ourselves a pat on the back. We want to give ourselves a pat on the back and establish a vitalizing cycle of I can. We need to acknowledge our improvements and our effort. So we give ourselves a pat on the back for the effort. Even if the results are not up to what we want, we should still give ourselves a pat on the back for the effort. This is very conducive to establish an attitude of I can and diminishing those distressing symptoms. I spot is not so much the event, but the attitude. In other words, the people, places, and things in the external environment. We may not be able to change them. We can only hope to favorably influence them. But we can change our attitude towards the external environment. We have control over our internal environment. We don't know that. This is why we are not able to diminish our symptoms on a continuous and regular basis until we learn techniques like self-talk that we can apply. Before that, we're doing it haphazardly, and we don't know to keep doing whatever it is we're doing that's diminishing our symptoms. And that's the secret. Consistency. If you do something like listen to music or go for a walk and it diminishes your symptoms, and they come back, well, this is only natural and to be expected. Setbacks are to be expected. Well, all you have to do is do what you did before. Go for a walk, listen to some music, meditate, whatever. Read a book, watch a movie, whatever it was. Just you keep doing it over and over, and you get the same result. Now, going to a movie or something of this nature may be expensive, or it may be not convenient, but there are other techniques that you can use which are more immediate, such as exchanging insecure thoughts for secure thoughts. There are thoughts that make us feel fearful or make us feel unworthy or incompetent, unsure, hesitant, doubtful. Now, there are other thoughts we can think, the things that we have accomplished, for example, in the past, that will make us feel quite confident, and establishes an I can attitude. See, what we have here is a narrow focus. When we're feeling down, despondent, fatigued, feeling less than, not as good as, we will tend to have a narrow focus on our failings. Now, anyone I don't care who they were, are that is. Pick any person you think is a significant or important person. If they were to focus only on their failings, I'm sure you could see that they would feel depressed, despondent, unworthy, less than, not as good as. But that narrow focus is a partial view, and no one leads a partial life. We all have instances of confidence, and examples of where we have been everything that we hope to be, and that's one part of our life. We don't want to compartmentalize these things and have the narrow view. We want to have an overall view. There are no heroes, angels, or saints here. We are human beings having an average experience. So we have the average failings that a human being can have, but we also have those confidences and competencies that human beings can have also. So don't be so hard on yourself. We need to learn to be more tolerant of ourselves, because we are very tolerant of other people, typically, or usually. But going on here, I spotted not so much the event, but the attitude. She behaved in a cultured manner, wore the mask. She didn't complain and whine and seek sympathy and become the center of attention. And this, when you do this, we're telling ourselves when we do this, that we need help. Oh, I can't handle this. This is more than I can bear. And this is establishes an attitude of feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. So you wear the mask, you don't complain, no one knows what's going on in your inner environment, and you're functioning in spite of the way you're feeling, and you're establishing an I can attitude because you're moving your muscle, and so forth, etc., etc. She was self-led, not symptom-led. Symptoms are telling this is dangerous, you can't handle this, is more than you can bear, you need to go home and go to bed, and just pull the covers up over your head, so forth, etc., etc. To be self-led, to use the axioms, move your muscles, wear the mask, and she didn't go for the symbolic victory, which would be to complain and moan and become the center of attention, as though to prove to other people that she was really, in fact, sick and needed to have the day off. So this is being self-led, not symptom-led. If we're not endorsing ourselves, giving ourselves on the pat of the back, even for the smallest gains, it's as though it never happened. And so then this allows us to continue that narrow focus on our failings, on the negative aspects of life, which is self-defeating. This is sabotage. These are self-defeating thoughts. So we want to exchange our insecure thoughts, our fear-producing thoughts, our sabotaging thoughts for secure thoughts that make us feel secure. Getting Better checks in. I always like to see Getting Better posting our example, because she is recovering from aneurysm nervosa and doing quite well simply by manipulating her internal dialogue, where other therapies have failed her in the past. And she says, I spot we suffer from our own philosophy, the way we think. We think our thoughts are right and our feelings are real. The more we move beyond our comfort zone, the better we get. Our symptoms are fate-appointed and not self-appointed. We didn't purposely make ourselves sick or, do something that caused it. Sometimes we just break down because we don't know how to cope with the environment. Don't accuse oneself. Have the courage to make mistakes. And this strengthens your mental fortitude against the anxiety that, what will others think of me? Have the courage to make a mistake, regardless of what other people think. It isn't what other people think that's important, it's what we think of ourselves that's important. 1,000 accolades from the outer environment, the people, places, and things, cannot measure up to one victory over the inner environment. Being able to manipulate our internal dialogue to diminish our distressing symptoms. Complications are not emergencies. This reminds us not to treat everything as though it is an emergency. Some things are just routine complications to be met with routine measures. There's nothing to get worked up over. Human beings have never been known for endorsing themselves or giving themselves a pat on the back enough. People, places, and things don't work us up. We work ourselves up. It's not the people, places, and things. It's our reaction to the people, places, and things. And although we can't change the people, places, and things, we can change our reaction, our response, our attitude to the people, places, and things. She says, feelings are not facts. They lie and deceive us and tell us there is danger when there is none. When there is an intruder in the brain, I don't have to entertain it. She went for objectivity.